Well, hello, YouTube family. It is me, Miss Dana Ashlie. How are you? I am fine. You guys are the best. I still am not used to the fact that people worry about me. And I'm just not. I'm sorry. I appreciate it though. And I am letting you know right now, as a precursor to this phenomenal video you're about to see, that all is well. I've been doing IRL life stuff, like, you know, hands in the dirt and the garden and the chickens and stuff. What are the babies doing? Which has been amazing. My daughter's been able to have school in person. Also a huge blessing. The one thing that's not there so much as here is high-speed internet. So now that I'm back in California, I am very excited to get a lot more content out to you guys. And I want to let you know how we're going to do this, because obviously I just can't talk about what I want to talk about. So here's the plan. Well, first of all, no! Shh! Cat's trying to get the birds through the cat fence. You want to see? Oh, I can't turn this thing around. That little sucker. He's trying to go after my birds, and I don't want that. Anyway, so here's the plan. If I do something that's controversial, I'm probably just going to come on here and make an announcement of it and then point you to the direction where the video can be found. What you will find on my alternate channel, which is where I did do a video more recently about a poke. That's on my Dana Ashlie 2 channel, which there's a link to below. Obviously, I upload things to Patreon first, but then I also make announcements on Telegram, and that's where I've actually been sharing a lot of information about the medical world. So go to Telegram if you want to receive information that at this point is not censored. Other than that, a lot of you keep asking about Bitchute and library, and I'm already there. I don't know why you guys can't find me there. So what I've done is I've linked all the other channels where almost my entire library is intact. That's even the videos that were deleted off YouTube. So I think that's it. This is a pretty awesome video. I won't call it an interview because, well, I'm terrible at interviewing. I get excited, I interrupt. I never went to school for broadcasting or journalism, so I got to brush up. But I sure did enjoy my time on this video, and I think that there's a lot of really important information that will help a lot of people connect the dots about what's really going on and what the solution is. God bless you guys. I love you, and we'll talk to you soon. Well, hello, YouTube family. It is me, Miss Dana Ashlie. So good to be with you here again, and today, boy, do I have a treat. I have one of the most important speakers regarding the most important topic of our age, I believe, and that is the topic of technocracy. And I want to just clarify, I say most important because when you understand the goals of technocracy, and when you understand and take a look around at everything that is happening in the world, especially this past year and a half, you will be able to look at all of this and get a true sense of what is going on with all the confusion and division that is happening that will help you to cut right through it. And I want to help you to do that so that then that you'll know what to do about it. Our guest today is Patrick Wood. He is a most world-renowned speaker on the topic, has written 2 books, but I'll just read them to you here. Technocracy, The Hard Road to World Order, and Technocracy Rising, The Trojan Horse of Global Transformation. He is an economist by education, a financial analyst, and an American constitutionalist. I also want to mention that Patrick co-authored another brilliant book with the late Anthony Sutton, Trilaterals over Washington. Thank you, Patrick, so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you so that people can understand better this most important information.
You and I have had 2 or 3 other meetings, I think, along the way, and we've always done quite well. And I appreciate your persistence in staying at it.
Yeah, well, what choice do we have, right? I mean, it is a little scary with the
Yes.
level of censorship and the threats of even imprisonment for sharing hate speech, is what they call it, which is bizarre to me because it's our love of truth that helps us to persevere, or at least that's the case for me. So again, I just really appreciate you being here.
Yes.
And I wanted to say, my first time seeing you, it was burned into my consciousness. It was an interview where they were bringing up the book that you and Anthony Sutton did laterals over Washington, it had generated enough awareness that they had gone into damage control and wrote a character into, at that time, was a very popular sitcom. Back when you have 3 channels, that's going to reach a lot of eyeballs.
Yes.
The Barney Miller Show. And they
Yes.
wrote in this paranoid, balding guy that was ranting and raving about the Trilateral Commission, of course.
Cam, this is William Klein. He was wrecking an office.
But I just wanted to meet them face to face. I wanted them to admit what they were doing.
Who is they? He was in the office of the Trilateral Commission.
Trilateral Commission.
Yeah, the Trilateral Commission.
All right, what is the Trilateral Commission?
It's an organization founded in 1973 by David Rockefeller to bring together business and political leaders from the United States, Europe, Japan, so they could work together for better economic and political cooperation between their nations.
And with that's what they'd like us to believe. But you see, what they're really up to is a scheme to plant their own loyal members in positions of power in this country, to work to erase national boundaries and create an international community, and in time bring about a one world government with David Rockefeller calling the shots.
We know that this is a tried and true propaganda technique to effectively ridicule anyone who would ever consider the possibility of an emerging world order. You guys must have really ruffled some feathers to get that kind of prime time.
We absolutely did. And I'll tell you what really did it, pushed us over the edge, if you will, was the fact that Larry King, who at the time was with Mutual Broadcasting System, had an overnight radio program in the middle of the night, and it was very popular. In fact, it was the most popular overnight radio program of all time right then. And they invited myself to be on the program, sitting across the table with the executive director of the Trilateral Commission at the time.
Really?
And we were
to see that.
we were nose to nose. Oh, I wish I could get a hold of that interview.
Oh my goodness!
I'm sure there was a video, but who knows where it is. But we went for, we're only supposed to go for 1 hour actually, and after 1 hour, it was so intense that Larry King just let it go. He knew that, hey, there's something big happening here. We just got to let it go. It went for 3 hours.
Wow!
And when it was all done, Larry King, who was very much as liberal back then as he was later in life, he looked at me in particular, and he shook his head. He didn't make any comment on the program or the content of the program. He said to me, "I've never seen anything like this before."
Wow!
And we shook hands and goodbye, and that was the end of it. That set the country on fire at that point, and that's what really, really got them upset. It was a total PR disaster.
Right.
For them.
Wow. Well, the good old days, that would never happen now. And first of all, they don't even let you finish your sentence, and they take out a thing of what you say and totally mischaracterize you. And so anyway, it would be fun to see that interview, though. I wanted to say right off the bat, Spiro, who sadly is now deleted off of YouTube, and Joseph Mercola have already done really wonderful interviews getting into the history of technology. And I'm going to have links to those videos that are still available online in the description notes so people can really get into the back history. But I wanted to take this discussion to the next level and really dissect what an incoming technocracy is going to look like for me and you and our children in our future. I think that's really important because because through all this division, we get sidetracked, right? Someone can take a person like Trump and then compare them to a person like Elon Musk and go, oh my gosh, these people have nothing in common, when nothing could be further from the truth. When you know what technocracy is, you can point out the overarching picture in the direction that they are going. So you'll be able to see through all of the lies and divisions. But first, we'll just take a really quick what technocracy is, the definition of it, which you've mentioned many times, is right from their own literature. Yep. It is the science of social engineering, the scientific operation of the entire social mechanism, the world, to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population. And when you just hear social engineering right off the bat, that sounds a little scary to me. I mean, that sounds like manipulation to me. But then you see the entire world's resources there. My goodness, that sounds so familiar. You will own nothing and be happy.
Mhm.
Could it possibly be related to the Great Reset?
Yeah, that's right. It is. And that statement, by the way, from the Technocrat magazine went on. The quote you have was normally what I would give to people. It's kind of the short version, but it goes on. Let me read you the next sentence.
Okay.
It says, this is how big their ego was. Okay. Scientists and engineers that dreamt this up. This is a replacement economic system for capitalism and free market economics. They were creating a utopia, they thought. To them, it was an engineer from scratch utopia. But this is how certain they were that their science was settled, that their view of the world was so perfect that it couldn't possibly be any better. Here's what they said. There will be no place for politics, politicians, finance, or financiers. Technology will distribute by means of a certificate of distribution available to every citizen from birth to death.
Wow.
Now, just let that sink in. This is just immense. There will be no place for politicians or politics.
Which basically means government represented by the people and for the people.
That's right. That's right. There is no. Why would you need interaction of citizens to discuss in their own ignorance what we know is right?
And I want to point out the reason why you're seeing on the mainstream media so much finger pointing to each side and calling out corrupt politicians is because they want you to get sick of it too. They want you to be willing to throw the politicians out, even though the system itself could be amazing. It's just that the corporations have infiltrated and all of the special interest groups have caused them to be corrupt. Truly. It also makes the media look like they're doing their job of being, unbiased, right?
That's exactly right. And I'll say, just before we go on to the next topic, we all have heard the talk about decentralization in government and amongst technocrats as well. But you hear this term all the time, passing power down the line. It isn't ever really done, but they talk about it. Decentralization, turning power over to people. I'll give you an example. Would be when the president says, well, we're not going to have a national mandate for vaccine, but we encourage all businesses to do what they want to do.
Exactly.
It's like, okay, that throws all of the power and culpability away from the government and out there somewhere in the hinterland. The end result of this is to control society through artificial intelligence.
Yes.
That is contradictory to a political system of any kind. And I hate to say these our politicians. I still say our. Can we call them our politicians? I don't know who they're not our politicians. They're usurpers. But they're in government right now trying to cozy up to the big tech. And they think, oh, we can use these guys because we can use them to censor this and that, whatever. And they think that they somehow have the upper hand in this deal. I got news for them. I'll just put them on note right now. These technocrat oligarchs will crush you. They will throw you under the bus at the first opportunity that they have to get away with it, and they will destroy the entire political system and our structure from top to bottom. That means all national agencies. It means all state agencies, state government, state legislatures, etc. They'll destroy it and throw everybody under the bus in the political system for the sake of taking over and simply ruling by algorithm.
After they use them to push their narrative to get it done in the first place.
Yes.
And I'm sure we're all so sick of hearing about the CV. You call it, we'll just call it what you call it instead of the CV9, you know what I'm saying, the Great Panic of 2020. And I've heard you make reference to it as a coup d'etat, right? And so the people that aren't familiar with what a real functioning technocracy looks like, can you lay out exactly how this event puts the world into the perfect position of totally smoothly shifting into a technocracy, when without that narrative, it would have been much more difficult to accomplish?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, the best example of what it would look like is in the book, Brave New World.
Right.
It was written in 1932, in the same year that Technocracy was at Columbia University. A lot of people read it. A lot of people heard about it because everybody says it, uses that phrase, oh, it's a brave new world, isn't it? Well, if you think about the book, it was a complete scientific dictatorship. Nobody made any personal decisions. There was none. You did what they told you and you were happy about it. You owned nothing and you were happy about it. If you weren't unhappy, you would simply take a little pill called Soma, which is a drug today too, Soma.
Right.
And you would be happy, happy, happy. And all your inner resistance would melt away. But here's two things to think about. One is there was no family structure at all. And they were expected and commanded to have multiple sexual relationships with everybody, but never to fall in love.
Oh, wow. I didn't remember that part.
And the women just, they were, who am I going to be with tonight? Well, I don't know. Nobody's asked me yet.
That seems familiar.
And the guys, I'm going to pick up on that one tonight. Oh, you got the other one. No family, no pregnancies, because all the children were born in test tubes in laboratories according to their genetic engineered structure. There were deltas, there were alphas, there were betas, all with different intelligence, born for different aspects of working in that society. And most importantly, there was no political structure whatever.
Right.
There was only the director, the head alpha of the whole pack. He was the guy that decided everything everybody did, and there was no way to protest. There was no way to appeal, nothing. This is the utopia that technocracy was, and is today. The same focus and the same channel that we're in today was modeled on that crackpot utopian theory back then.
And you say the key phrase that really sticks out to me, which is a scientific dictatorship.
Yes.
And oh my goodness, what have we not seen for the past 18 months but a full-on takeover of a scientific dictatorship?
Yes.
And
Yes.
let's just remember, because I don't know about you guys, but I actually wasn't taught about the Bolshevik Revolution that happened in Russia in the 1930s and before. Let's remember that they were instilling scientific atheism, and their stated goals were to share the wealth with everyone, right? Sounds so altruistic, right? But let's remember that I think that what happened next scene was like the brutal murdering, torturing, and starvation of like 100 million Christians or something, some number like that. I mean, it's just a mess. Like, this is why we're not taught this history. But in terms of like what we're dealing with right now, I mean, when I think of this incoming technocracy, I think, well, with this story, this narrative, they can do away with money because it's going to be contagious, right? That's easy. The biological surveillance, totally justified with this narrative. Small businesses, done. So many things are accomplished. It's evil, genius. Oh, and then don't forget universal basic income. That's a part of it too, right?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. It's one of the key parts. People like Ray Kurzweil a few years ago predicted that by the 30s, universal basic income would be global, not just local in America. And the idea is that robotics and AI is going to take over so many functions of society that people will have no place to do anything anymore. They won't be able to work because there's no work to do. Work is done by everything else. And so you'll have to somehow appease the masses. And by that, you can give them universal basic income.
What to do about mass unemployment? This is going to be a massive social challenge. And I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income. I don't think we're going to have a choice.
Which really sounds to a lot of people appealing on the front.
Sure.
Especially the ones that are taking welfare right now. Oh, I go universal basic income forever. But you know what they're creating here? They're creating a neo-feudalism where slavery will be universal because you will be a slave of the state.
There's strings attached.
If you get money from the state, they will tell you what to do for that money.
Exactly.
And if they want you to go out and lay pavement on the road or build brick walls like they did during World War II, they will do it, and you will comply, or your check will be cut off.
Exactly. And on the note of science, though, this is the part that really I only get frustrated about a few things. But one of the things is how they're approaching science. I mean, I respect the scientific method Okay. It is to take an idea, to test it, to ask questions about it, to prove it right or wrong. But that's not what we've got going on here. This is why you see scientists being deleted off of YouTube and Facebook. They are scientists. They're just having a narrative that doesn't fit theirs. So why don't you explain briefly the difference between scientism and the scientific method, which are two totally different things as far as I can see.
Well, that's exactly right. Real science, as we have known it historically, is merely about trying to explain the nature of reality and the universe. It's by observation mostly. And that observation must be repeatable. It must be able to be shown to other people to be true. And it always accepts debate from other scientists that are observing the same thing. This has always been the way it is. But, medicine has been practiced in a way historically that took care of the patient-doctor relationship where doctors actually consider the individual status of a person rather than just taking some kind of universal protocol from the CDC or wherever to treat everybody. Whenever any kind of a rigid structure is placed on something like science is right now, it changes from being science into being pseudoscience. And pseudoscience is false science. It masquerades as science. It's not anti-science, it's pseudoscience. It's like science, but it is not science. It's a fatal mistake to equate what they call science with real science.
Because science is never settled. By the scientific method itself, it's never meant to be settled. It's meant to always be tested. Otherwise, we'd still be spraying kids with DDT today, right?
That's right.
I mean, it was only because someone tested it and said, wait a minute, this can cause neurological issues, that it becomes tested and we take a shift and do something different. But what I'm seeing now is if you even dare to question what they're saying, you are done. You are hate speech. You are false. What do they call it? Dangerous. If you're spreading dangerous information, and my goodness, talk about dangerous. That's in and of itself is dangerous. Which reminds me of the was it Saint-Simon who was the original? I mean, this has actually been going on longer than Technocracy in the 30s. It was him who basically put scientists on this level of like gods, right?
Yes, this is where it started. In fact, both Technocracy and transhumanism look back to Saint-Simon as the intellectual father of both movements. And he also, most notably and importantly, he really gave birth to the religion of scientism.
Oh, a religion cult. That's what it is. You can't question it.
It is a religion, and scientism is the most dangerous, in my opinion, the most dangerous religious proposition in the history of the world. It's very similar to, in a sense, to Gnosticism 2,000 years ago, but it's very dangerous. And here's what it proposes. Scientism is the idea that science is the ultimate path to knowledge and wisdom, the only sure path, that the spiritual realm is a mirage. C.S. Lewis, by the way, wrote extensively about scientism. And he never criticized science per se. He loved science, as I do, real science. And he was merciless on attacking scientism as being a religion that was hiding in plain sight. And I'd say back then it still wasn't really as big as it is today.
It's very dangerous, Chuck, because a lot of what you're seeing as attacks on me, quite frankly, are attacks on science. Because all of the things that I have spoken about consistently from the very beginning have been fundamentally based on science. So if you are trying to, get at me as a public health official and a scientist, you're really attacking not only Dr. Anthony Fauci, you're attacking science. And anybody that looks at what's going on clearly sees that. You have to be asleep not to see that. That is what's going on. Science and the truth are being attacked.
But today, every little nook and cranny of this whole thing smacks of scientism.
That's exactly what we've seen set up in the last 18 months, 1000%, which is why I can't even do videos about it anymore. I'm hoping with this topic I can we're stepped back far enough to maybe get away with it. I'm going to try at least. I would also like to point out, as we segue into, I want people to really understand how Technocracy is really a name that has been rebranded into something that more people would probably know about, which is sustainable development and the goals affiliated with that. So I really want to get into showing how these two things are actually the same thing. But first, I kind of want to point out, just to give people a little background about how I see things in terms of capitalism. I am pro-capitalism. It's not perfect, right? And as an example, because things aren't just so black and white, they're oftentimes gray. And as an example of how capitalism does have its flaws, when I grew up in Arkansas as a child in the 80s, I would look around and I would see these pristine forests, right? Total ecosystem full of diversity and all kinds of different trees and birds. And near and dear to my heart right there. So there's that. And then I would see them come in and take that forest out. And Patrick, it would look like a nuclear bomb went off. And hundreds and hundreds of acres out in the middle of nowhere, some people would say, but it was my home and it was awful. And, then they would come in and they would plant pine trees, fast growing soft pine as their commodity, as their, product. And in that way, I do question, there isn't need to put a real price on things that capitalism has failed in some regards to do. The cost that they got from those trees they took out didn't really include the ecosystem and the damage that they did in that. So I'm not, advocating for technocracy, but what I want to point out with this is to say they're taking things that they did wrongly in the first place, and then they're selling it back to us to say, well, technocracy will fix all of this, right? But I just want people to understand that the propaganda that they're pushing us through this sustainable development is not what we are going to get in the end. And I really, really wanted to point that out. The altruistic things they sell you is to get you roped into it emotionally so that you'll accept it. But in truth, it is not at all what they plan to do in the end. So I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, but I wanted to look at the goals of sustainable development one at a time. Maybe I can share my screen and we can take a look at them.
Absolutely. And when we're done with that, I will give you some documentation to back up what you just said.
Oh, okay. All right.
But go ahead. I want to get into the sustainable development goals.
It's huge. And people really need to understand this because this is what's coming. This is definitely what's coming. Okay. As you can see here, these are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Again, you don't hear the word technocracy, but you do hear about this a lot. And they've even now come out and say, what is it? Climate deniers. They have all these phrases to vilify and make people criminals. I know the climate actually is changing. It's changing because they're changing it. Weather manipulation is a very old science, and that seems so just evil. But my friends, this is what is happening.
I just want to make a quick note to back up this very loaded statement I made in this interview. Not that any of you need any reminders about how every tragic weather event under the sun today is blamed on climate, you know what. But I'll make one point to effectively back up this idea of intentional events to push us into these SD goals. It's on the topic of fires. Being in California myself throughout some very scary fire seasons, I've seen with my own eyes evidence of very abnormal activity connected to these fires. But with all that devastation, one with discerning eyes can clearly see what we are told are wild forest fires. They just so happen to skip the forests. In the 2017-18 fires, we see dustification of homes to the ground. We see cars flipped upside down. This is not possible with normal physics. Oftentimes of the homes, there was nothing left, no granite, no steel. That's not what happens in normal fires. Meanwhile, trees stand green all around them. We see melted glass and liquefied aluminum on the ground around the cars, but it's common knowledge that those things don't just melt without a kiln to surround them, so the temperature can be steadily maintained between 1200 to 2000 degrees, when open-aired fires typically only peak at 900 to even at the most 1100 degrees. You can see here in this test that they did. That's a raging fire. Never hit 900. The government has already admitted way back in 2003 that they have directed energy, you know what, WEAPONS technology. We know such devices could feasibly accomplish this kind of physics, but why? This brings us back to SD goals. Perhaps it's just a coincidence that when you superimpose the areas where these fires are raging, they just so happen to be the same areas that were proposed to be set aside to be off limits to human use zones that you see here on this map. This map was proposing to protect biodiversity as within the UN Biodiversity Treaty and Wildlands Project. Yeah. And this year, 2021, Idaho has had raging fires in the same exact areas that were slated to be human-free as well. And this is even though Idaho historically boasted some of the lowest fire frequency in the entire United States. And although the passing of this particular legislation that was attached to that map was blocked by some good politicians in those days, could they be moving forward anyway in a different, albeit more subversive and plainly evil way, while they beat the drum of climate CHANGE all the way? Or is this just a coincidence? I'll let you be the judge.
They're changing it so that we will be willing to accept their sustainable development goals. Why don't we go through here, if you can see that okay, and point out the ones that pop out to you as being a perfect equal measure of technocracy, how they're one and the same.
Well, the most important thing to know about the Sustainable Development Goals is that they propose an altruistic, utopian-like society where the promises are always at the front of the, like the carrot on a stick, string on a stick, that the promises are always delivered up front. For instance, no poverty.
Right.
Well, who's for poverty? You want people to be poor? Zero hunger. You want people to be hungry? Well, no.
Sounds great.
Okay. And good health and wealth. Don't you want everybody to be healthy? And what about education? Oh, we need everybody. What about the poor people in Africa? Shouldn't they be educated too? And then you got number 5, gender equality, which we hear about all this stuff today about LGBTQ ad infinitum, and clean water and sanitation. People, they say, well, people don't have access to clean water and it's very dangerous. And then how about number 8? I love this one, decent work and economic growth. Really? Okay. They're going to do all this for us if we merely accept their proposition of sustainable development. But when you get down a little bit further, go down a little bit more, and you got climate action, number 13. You've got life below water. Oh, now they're talking about all the resources in the ocean too. And life on land, number 15. They're talking about everything on the face of the earth. And I love 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, namely them telling us what to do. You have to look down into the goals to find out what they're really all about.
Right.
When you get down to the bottom of it, the only thing you have to give up to get all these benefits is all the resources of the world. You have to turn it all over to them. Everything. All the land and resources, all the water, everything, all the minerals, everything under the ocean, everything on the face of the planet. Turn it over to them to be put into a global common trust to be reallocated to you and me according to their own vision of social justice.
I want to show you that you don't even have to dig deep in the SUSDEV goals to find what Patrick mentions here. In their very preamble, they state it clearly. Look at this. We are determined to protect the planet from degradation, including through sustainable consumption and production, sustainably managing its natural resources, and taking urgent action on climate change so that it can support the needs of the present and future generations. Managing the planet's, the entire world's natural resources. And they will manage nothing less than the planet's consumption and production. And what is the goal of Technocracy again? Quote, the science of social engineering to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population. Their stated goals are the same. Technocrats will produce and distribute the world's resources, and in SUSDEV, they call it production and consumption. Either way, it's them. They get to decide what you are allowed to consume. They will decide how they will distribute the world's resources to you. You have no choice in the matter, and you should trust them because they're doing it to, quote, protect the planet, of course. I do wonder how we are supposed to believe this, though, when one of the most famous pure-blood technocrats, Sust dev cheerleader, Bill Gates, with his billions, did not take his precious money and do things that align with the majority of these utopian promises. Did he provide the poor with clean water to replace their muddy, parasite-infected, disease-causing water? By digging wells in the villages of Africa or India, which we all know would vastly cut down on disease, that he claimed was his number one priority? No, he did not. Did he provide them with nutritious food? Or help them to be able to provide food for themselves by providing them with land for gardening, farm animals, soil amendments, or seeds? No, he did not. Now, he was able to follow SustDev goal number 3B, as if it's some kind of afterthought. Look at your screen because I can't even say this word due to censorship. Support the research and development of shoulder pokes, which should give you great pause to what SustDev number 3 really is about, ensuring healthy lives in support of our well-being, when they're going to decide how they're going to use the resources to ensure your healthy life, regardless of what you think it means to be healthy. By Technocrat Bill's example, that's his fruit. I can't help but think of what they promise will happen versus what will actually happen will be a lot like the image you see here. It is our current type of government that is meant to represent the people, that was set up to guarantee individual rights, and the leaders elected by us. But now we are seeing those rights slip through our fingers every news cycle, not because of a flu, but because individual rights have no place in a technocracy.
This is not wealth sharing. This is not even socialism, which talked about sharing the wealth. There is no sharing the wealth here. They will own everything and you will own nothing. And furthermore, the World Economic Forum has the guts to say, and you'll be happy about it. Well, what? Is this Brave New World where we just have to take a pill to make sure we're happy? Well, I guess, pull out your iPhone, get some more likes real quick, your Instagram, whatever.
Dopamine hit. No, because you've been studying this so long, I feel you probably have some examples here. Because one thing that annoys me about these groups that are banging away at the climate crisis and telling the climate deniers are evil and everything, these are the same people who profited greatly from these industries that they're now vilifying. I mean, Rockefeller Oil is one that comes to the front of my mind. Can you think of other examples of the people that are now involved with this climate sustainability, how they were involved in the same things that wrecked the damage in the first place?
Yes. Basically, this was noted as far back in print, as far back as 1994, concerning the Rio conference, the first Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, which produced Agenda 21 and Sustainable Development. That's where it all started, officially, to be spread to the world. They were talking about it before that, but they made a program. That's when they executed it. It was in 1992. People that were at the convention or at that conference as principals, attending all the big mucky-muck meetings and negotiating and stuff, many of them were some of the original environmentalists that really did kind of care about the earth. One such writer who wrote in a book called The Earth Brokers, I just got to read this to you. This is amazing. This is a direct quote.
Okay.
We argue in the book, that UNCED, that's the United Nations Conference on Economic Development, okay, that's who produced that meeting, UNCED. We argue that UNCED has boosted precisely the type of industrial development that is destructive for the environment, the planet, and its inhabitants. We see how, as a result of UNCED, the rich will get richer, the poor poorer, while more and more of the planet is destroyed in the process. Close quote. That's stunning. 1994, these people wrote about it bluntly, saying the very things they promised they're going to do, they're actually doing just the opposite. They say they're going to save the world, but in fact, they are destroying the world in the process.
I think one of the examples we have today, if we want to look at what's coming, I mean, a lot of people think of China as communist. right? Or a communistic dictatorship. And it's true. Communism has a role of sort of wiping away of the culture and everything that people knew before. And if we're talking about going into a brave new world, like that's such a huge change for what America is. It makes sense that they would have to have something so big as this narrative, the Great Panic of 2020, to wipe it away. But I want to just, maybe you can let people know that China is a functioning technocracy. What are they dealing with as people? What is their day-to-day like that could be our future if we don't stop this?
I think everybody by now has heard about social credit scoring system and the surveillance camera network they have set up, some 600 million cameras for 1.2 billion people. It's insane. China is a functioning technocracy today. That did not happen by accident, by the way. I'll tell you where it came from. It came from the bowels of the Trilateral Commission. When China came back on the world stage, it was Zbigniew Brzezinski who brought them back. Brzezinski, as President Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, was the guy who went over to China, talked the premier at the time, Deng Xiaoping, to come over to the United States to be welcomed back into the global economic fold.
His arrival in Washington was a very big deal.
There was a pause and a wave for the cameras. But later in the evening, he slipped off for dinner with Zbigniew Brzezinski.
Brzezinski, Carter's national security advisor, was instrumental in forging the new relationship. Visiting China in May, he'd invited Deng to his home for dinner when he came to Washington. Deng accepted, helping to serve that night 11-year-old daughter Mika Brzezinski.
40 years ago tomorrow, when Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping reached an historic agreement with President Jimmy Carter. The night before that White House summit, 40 years ago tonight, Deng Xiaoping had dinner with my family at her house in McLean, Virginia.
And I can guarantee you, Brzezinski did not teach them about free market economics. But on the other hand, he had a clean slate, because what China looked like then, what North Korea looks like today, it was a train wreck. It was a disaster. Mm-hmm. So when Brzezinski seeded them with the concepts of technocracy, they took to it like a duck takes to water. Engineers and scientists are running everything there. They keep the whole facade of the red background, the hammer, sickle, and the Communist Party just as a stage show for what they want you to think is going on. But it's not communism anymore. It's flat out technocracy. Ruled by algorithm.
You jaywalk, you're shunned by your picture being displayed on everywhere, and you have the ticket in your P.O. box by the time you get home. They've already taken it out of your bank account. This is like what we're talking about. Like, this is the level of control that we're moving into. And I think people get really distracted with the narratives that they're fooling everyone here with when they talk about someone like Trump, right? He seems, he has bad things to say about China in terms of how they're doing things that we would never do, right? That's what people just, they buy it. He'll throw us a few things like the TPP or whatever. So throw a bone here and there. However, if you really look at it, let's talk about it. I mean, Trump is that guy that people got fooled by. And I would like to say, well, what did Trump do that absolutely, and I can think of two big ones, if you don't name them, I will, that absolutely made the technocracy full force here in America?
Oh, absolutely. The first one, of course, was the bum's rush to establish 5G throughout America.
Absolutely.
That was huge. Just opened the door for a steamroller to come in and plow out this 5G network, which was openly intended to connect the Internet of Things.
That's you and me, the thing they want us to become.
That is pure 100% surveillance technology.
Yes.
And this has been a goal of technocrats for a long time. The second thing was, of course, the vaccine. This whole business of bringing the military in, FedEx doesn't work? UPS doesn't work? I mean, this DHL doesn't work? Come on, guys. Of course it does. Well, the bums rush to bow to these scientific dictators like Anthony Fauci, who was standing right by the president all those days, right? He was in control of the narrative, not the president. And the president, I mean, he might have, certainly he went along with it, but
went through the motions. But he applauded these companies that had criminal records. He removed all safety regulations. He said, we're going to fast track this.
3 days, less than 9 months. and it's great. And you know what? I believe totally in your freedoms. I do. You got to do what you have to do. But I recommend take the vaccines. I did it. It's good. Take the vaccines. But no, that's okay. That's all right. You got your freedoms. But I happen to take the vaccine.
Anyway, this is the kind of thing that can get me in
It has.
trouble. I have no opinion about this, of course.
It has brought us to a state of lawlessness in America today because the Constitution has been thrown out the door effectively. Our laws, our existing statutes, laws that were passed in a proper way by a U.S. Congress and by states have been completely trampled, thrown out the door for the sake of an emergency, a declared emergency. But this is where we are today. It started with President Trump. It started well before. It started, go back
way before
Obama, go back to George W. Bush, go back to Bill Clinton and Al Gore, go back into the 80s with Ronald Reagan. In every single presidency since at least 1970, the under the surface movement of technocracy has just completely been ignored by everybody, and every presidency has allowed this group of people to have free will to do anything they wanted to do. They did it all during those administrations. They did it all during the Clintons and the Bushes and the Obamas, right up to today and through the Trump administration.
Absolutely. I don't think it's hard to see what Biden's doing. I'll just throw this one little thing out that most people don't realize that Reagan did. Everyone's talking today about how we'll call them Miser and Modern A, those companies that created you know what? They have no liability. None. Anything that's created under the term VA, X has no liability. They can make whatever they want, put it in you. It can do whatever it does to you. And they do not pay a penny. Guess who did that? Ronald Reagan.
That's right. Today, we're in the worst shape we have ever been in 200 plus years because these technocrats have operated with impunity through every administration since at least 1970. They're finally getting to the point where they can assert direct authority over us, as in Fauci standing up and virtually dictating health policy to the whole country, which is
the autonomy of your own body, basically, which is totally a technocratic idea. Speaking about going back in time, it was the Club of Rome, I think. It was found in some of their documents where they were, trying to figure out what they could do to bring in the kind of control that they ultimately wanted. And they mused over the idea of creating a climate, CRISIS, to get that sort of fear in the people to be able to get that. Do you remember that quote?
Oh, I do. They were the ones that that wrote openly in their book, Limits to Power, that the Earth could only support 500 million people.
Right.
Today, the Club of Rome, a favorite environmental think tank advising the UN, publicly states its mission is to address the multiple crises facing humanity and the planet. Yet my issue with them, besides their mission to make decisions for the rest of us, is found in their own writing stating how they would convince the rest of the world that there were these supposed crises in the first place. Because we must be convinced there are these problems in order to coerce us into giving up our rights and following the advice given by them. Here's what their own document stated. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself. We believe humanity requires a common motivation, namely a common adversary, in order to realize world government. It does not matter if this common enemy is a real one or one invented for the purpose. They then go on to say, in searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. This is taken from the original version of the 91 book, The First Global Revolution, written by the founders of the Club of Rome. And it was that club who made the 1974 comment that the earth has a cancer and the cancer is man. This is their foundational philosophy in a nutshell, and it perfectly explains everything that is happening today. This unelected body of elite members and their anti-human philosophy are the wisdom that are behind the Sust Dev goals. The same
Goals that will attempt to dictate what you, your children, and grandchildren will be allowed to buy, sell, or do in the very near future. And to my people who watch for prophecy, you may be particularly interested to hear that this think tank also called for a world that is ultimately divided into 10 pieces or bioregions. See their own map showing that here. This is right out of the books of Daniel and Revelation that foretold our world would be divided into 10 kings that rule with the Antichrist. Daniel 7:24. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise. Revelation 17:12. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they will receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. And although their time with the AC will be very short, they have wasted no time speaking their anti-human intentions plainly to prepare the world for his coming. Club member Maurice Strong stated, "Isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized nations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about?" And what, my friends, are you seeing happening right now? Ted Turner was not only the founder of CNN and major United, donor, but also a club member who said a total population of 250 to 300 million people, 95% decline from present levels, would be ideal. Supposed environmentalist club member Al Gore said in 2006, "I believe it's appropriate to have an over-representation of the facts on how dangerous it is as a predicate for opening up the audience." The quotes of these members go on, but suffice it to say that these people are liars, and they will use the urgency they create around their own man-made crises to convince the world to bow down to these 17 SUSDEV goals.
And let me just kind of make this point. I think people can grasp this okay. Before 1973, there were lots of people who were promoting globalization and global federalism and stuff. There were tons of people. They never got anywhere as a problem. That was recognized by Rockefeller in 1973 when he said, we're starting the Trilateral Commission in order to create this new international economic order. They were the group that finally kickstarted a new plan, an action plan to accomplish all of the things that they'd been talking about up to that point. They didn't just come up with a brand new plan in 1973. There had been lots of groundwork laid before that had gotten nowhere. And they said, guys, we're tired of getting nowhere. We need action. We need to do it now. And so Rockefeller teamed up with Brzezinski, the beauty and the beast, so to speak, with Rockefeller's money and Brzezinski's brains. And they architected a brand new economic system from scratch, again, using technocracy, that the world had never seen. And they said, this is what we will conquer the world with, if you will. And I fully believe that Rockefeller, the money man that he was, understood there was a finite limit to money as it was in the world in that day. His only desire at that point was basically kind of putting money aside. Money's temporary. Was to get control of the resources of the world. Because if you own all the resources, it doesn't matter what you call money. You could call it, you could use beads like the Indians did at one, or notched sticks or shoelaces. It doesn't
Practically what our money is, if you want to be honest about it.
It is. It doesn't matter what you would call money or use as money. If you own the resources, it's like this. Okay, I own it, you don't. You want some? What are you going to do for me? It's
got to do it my way.
You're not going to get it unless I give it to you. So you do what I tell you to do, or I'm not giving you any. So go smoke that in your pipe. Well, people think, well, that's really weird. Well, isn't that just what Klaus Schwab said? You will own nothing and be happy about it. The only problem with that is, ain't nobody going to be happy about it. Here's the other side of that coin. If you own nothing and you're happy about it and you're renting everything on a pay-per-view, basically, who does own it? Somebody has to own it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who owns it?
And a lot of people have rightly connected the role of Technocracy and everything that's moving forward with this narrative to eugenics. And another program that went on wide open in America. I'd love it if you quickly could share how this topic is so near and dear to your heart. I think you shared that with Spiro, how the the very real program of eugenics. It was full force in this country. What it looked like and how it impacted you, and how this is tied in with technology as well.
The eugenics movement really did start in America, and mostly in Berkeley, California. It's just amazing. But it caught on in the early century, and back in the 20s, eugenics was a big thing. And if you had genetic problems in your family or other things that you were determined to give birth to an undesirable, why, you should not allow that to happen. As it turned out, my grandmother, who was a socialite in San Francisco, among other things, bought into all this eugenic garbage and this purity of the races sort of thing. And she had a son. Her firstborn was a son who had some mental retardation as he grew older. They found that out to the level of about a 5 or 6 year old. And then she had a daughter that would end up being my mother. But her daughter was a normal child, completely normal. And the doctors got a hold of my grandmother and says, we've determined that this genetic defect that your son has is going to skip a generation and be inherited by the next generation. So your daughter is clean, but her progeny are going to be problematic.
Wow.
So what you need to do is sterilize your daughter, so she can't have children. And my grandmother,
because they said so, because they're the scientists.
Just because they said so. And my grandmother believed it. She took my mother when she was like 17 years old, kicking and screaming, down to a hospital where they put her on the tray, and they took out her ovaries.
Wow, that is tragic.
And as a result, she could not have children. When she finally got married, she was very angry. Oh, she was very angry with her mother. I can't blame her.
Right.
But she could not have children, and she knew that. And so she adopted, and I was the adopted child.
Wow.
My birth parents came across after World War II from Holland. My birth mother was pregnant all the way on the boat, you can imagine.
Goodness.
And she landed in San Francisco, and I was delivered, and they had no way to do anything with me at the time. So they gave me up for adoption. And my mother adopted me, and I became her only son. I was raised that way, as her only son. This is actually near to me. I would not be talking to you here right now. I would not be here. You can picture that. I would not be here had my mother not been sterilized and adopted me off that ship.
Well, maybe God had a little bit of a silver lining in that for us, because
I'm convinced of it. It was evil to the core. But all I can say is, what the devil meant for evil, God took for good. And I'm happy with the result. But it is ugly. It's twisted. And this is being brought out now in the whole transhuman movement today.
Yes.
We have to talk about that, because that's the Siamese twin of technocracy right now.
Absolutely. That was my go for it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, technocracy is to society, the structure of society, as transhumanism is to the people who will live in that society. That makes sense? You got
one more time.
You have a container called technocracy,
yeah.
A container of society, how to run society. And then you have people who are going to live in that radically transformed society. Regular people like you and I don't fit in that new society. They need transhuman people to live in that new society that are body hacked, that are
mind better, don't they?
That are humanity 2.0 is for society 2.0. And the World Economic Forum is openly talking about transhumanism and how that is included in their concept of the Great Reset.
I think we want to create a society in which, from my perspective, you're able to enhance, but it isn't a prerequisite for participating in society to enhance in certain ways.
they're not just resetting the economic system, they're also at the same time resetting the human system, the humanity in the world, your human condition, your flesh, your genes. That's why they have to have access, genetic access to your arm to be able to put stuff in that will change your genetic structure. Now, having said that, I know some of your listeners are going to be absolutely freaking out. What, is this guy flat Earth or what? I got to read you something from that same book, The Earth Brokers from 1994. This is a mind blower, and people have to listen very, very carefully to what I'm going to say here.
Okay.
This was on page 43 of that book. If anybody wants to get the book and read it, it's on page 43. I told you so. Here's what they said. Quote, the convention, that's the Biodiversity Convention, implicitly equates the diversity of life, animals and plants, to the diversity of genetic codes. By doing so, diversity becomes something modern science can manipulate. It promotes biotechnology as being, quote, essential for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. 1994, they saw this. They were talking about this at those meetings in 1992. Okay, it goes on the next page. The main stake raised, okay, this not the minor stake, this is the main stake raised by the Biodiversity Convention, which all the nations of the world signed, is the issue of ownership and control over biological diversity. The major concern was protecting, listen, the pharmaceutical and emerging biotechnology industries.
So rather than just protecting the biodiversity that God gave us, which is immense, they take it the totally illogical step forward to say we need to protect their manipulation of God's biodiversity.
That's right. This is how language is repurposed to mean something other than what you think. To you and I, in the old way, we think biodiversity. Well, I love that. You walk out into the woods and you see different kinds of birds and you see lizards and you see snakes and you see animals and you think, oh, what a wonderfully biodiverse world that we live in, all this different life species. And you think that's what biodiversity meant. That's kind of what it meant to the original environmentalists, by the way, from the 50s and 60s, protect species to keep them from dying out and stuff. To these people, it's completely redefined. When they say biodiversity, they're thinking about the takeover by them of genetic code. That's DNA.
Yeah.
It's in seeds, it's in plants, it's in animals, which have already been bioengineered ad infinitum, and now they're doing it to humans.
Absolutely. And don't think for a second that all these Marvel series and superhuman movies that you see are anything less than propaganda to get you excited about being superhuman, to have, superpowers. That is all a perfect ploy to make you want to embrace it so you can have your superpower. It's all lies, 1000%.
That is exactly right. And if somebody were to make up kind of like these sustainable development goals, if there was something like the biodiversity goals or something, the 17 biodiversity goals, they would look pretty much the same way until you got down to the fine print. And by the way, all you need to do is just give us control over your DNA and everything will be fine.
Which is, no surprise why the modern JABS have a little bit of a manipulation going there. But I'll skip out of that real quick. We don't want to go too deep into that or I'll get banned. But it does perfectly segue me, Patrick, into the last thing I wanted to get into on the topic of biometrics and the new economy as promised by Technocracy. I can't help but think of Revelation 13:16, right? When it talks about the son of perdition, some call the Antichrist, it also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they have the mark.
And likewise, you have Daniel 2,
perfect bookends, Revelation and Daniel, he was shown Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the great statue as well as its interpretation. The statue represented all the powerful kingdoms of men from beginning to the end, from the head of gold or ancient Babylon all the way through to the feet of the end times, where the 10 toes in the statue of clay and iron are the same 10 kings that will rule with the AC in Revelation. But Daniel added another clue. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. It is very specific here. What will be mixed or mingled? They will mingle with the seed of men. Seed is genetics or DNA. They are attempting to manipulate seed DNA. This is a warning against the transhumanist agenda. They will attempt to manipulate the DNA of men. This is all foretold, and this is where God draws a line. But again, the mark of the beast that does that is also enabling you to buy or sell, which clearly indicates that this becomes the enemy's new economic system, which we now know is an AI-controlled transhumanist technocracy.
There you see a perfect segue of the economy. It's right there, buy or sell. Can't get around that one.
Yeah.
As it ties into their level of control over your body, they're going to connect something to our bodies. Well, we are not going to take it. We can never, ever, ever take it, even if it means our heads. No way. Because you are saying yes to the beast system. You are saying, I'm going to take the tattoo of the enemy forever. It reminds me of something that I saw you say, and I guess your YouTube, you do have a YouTube channel, and you talked about some predictions that you had for 2021 back in late 2020. And in your video, you mentioned there would be a renewed interest in Bible prophecy. And I'd like for you to elaborate a little bit on that and how, you know, the silver lining, if there is any, Patrick, to all of this is that it's got people really questioning what the heck is going on. And the Bible did say this would happen. I mean, are you seeing people that you never thought would be into such things, getting into it and asking you questions about this?
Yes. We could, 30 or 40 years ago, we could read everything in Bible prophecy from Daniel, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Book of Revelation, so on. You could read those books and understand pretty clearly what they say, but it was not quite so easy to relate it to, to current life.
Exactly.
Today, that's all changed. Today, we see a system that's lining up very closely with what we see in the Book of Revelation as being the system of that time. And the system of control, and you have to kind of think about this. I've studied this for a lot of years. The so-called Antichrist, this is really the pseudo-Christ, a false Christ that comes forward to become dictator of the world. They call him the Antichrist, but it's really the pseudo-Christ. He's a mere individual that has a finite being. He's in one place at one time and cannot possibly be dictator of the world without having a system to micromanage the world.
Right.
That is under his control.
They're not God.
That's right.
They have to cheat.
That's right. That's what we see today maturing as that kind of system that will play very easily. I mean, you could just see it playing into that 7-year period of time that we know as the tribulation, where this is the system that will be assumed by or taken over by the pseudo-Christ when he appears, okay? Now, he has not appeared yet. We're not to that stage. But only a fool, if anybody's ever read anything in Bible prophecy, would be a fool not to recognize the parallels between it. But here's another interesting twist. That mark of the beast, which has got a lot of mileage, right, in recent days.
Yeah.
The mark of the beast is not given as a punitive mark. It's given as a result of your willingness to worship the beast.
Yes.
The Antichrist, the false prophet, the devil. If you are willing to worship him, you will get the mark as a seal. Just in the same way that God has sealed all of his people with a mark, right? The devil says, I could play that game. If they'll worship me, I'll give them a special mark too. And that mark will be the end of you. If you're in the tribulation period and you're not a Christian and you take that mark, it says that's the end of you. Basically, you've chosen sides permanently and you're going to go the wrong way.
Mm.
But, you know, fortunately, I don't believe we're in that 7-year period yet.
It's
But
sure close.
the fact that worship is involved there in chapter 13 is very important to today's discussion about scientism and
Yes.
the worship of science.
Yes.
You see?
Absolutely.
People are worshiping science.
Mm.
Pseudoscience, but it's science nonetheless. It's cracked. It is scientism. And they're looking for all the nature of the universe, the nature of man, only through the lens of their so-called science. And they treat it like a god, and it has a priesthood. Just look at people like Fauci. It has a priesthood, just like Henri de Saint-Simon said back in 1816 or whatever it was, that there will be a priesthood administering science to society. This whole thing is being set up right under our nose right now, and people are worshiping science. They're worshiping their scientific instruments, like whether it be their iPhone, their games, their gaming consoles, or CNN or whatever, or the narrative, or the vaccine, or whatever they're worshiping. They're worshiping science. And you can see this developing into a religion that will exclude all other religions from the world. This is where the whole concept of anti-Semitism and anti-Christian comes into view here. This is not against Islam. This is not against Buddhism. There's no persecution there.
No.
Do you remember in Canada just recently there were like 11 churches burned to the ground across Canada?
I'm really glad you mentioned it, because in my
17 others that were basically destroyed, not by fire, but they were completely vandalized and ruined. Nobody talks about this, but guys, the persecution of Christians is just a hair's breadth away at this point.
Oh, it's the next logical step.
Yes, they're going to blame the Christians. Now listen,
they already are. They already are.
This has already been done in a sense. They're blaming the pandemic now on the unvaccinated.
Yes. And then
in the next breath they say that most of the unvaccinated people are Christians. Therefore, it's really their fault.
Absolutely.
We're the ones that are killing their grandma.
And the people who have maybe never been open to Bible prophecy and the truth that Jesus spoke before, I hope that this, God, please, open their eyes to see and open their ears to hear that there's a reason why we will be persecuted for not bowing to their system of scientism. There's a reason why scientific atheism in Bolshevik Russia killed 100 million Christians that would not bow down to scientific atheism. This is the call to action. Allow your heart to seek truth. Because if you seek truth and you've gotten this far and you know about the Untitled Commission, you know about the, sustainable, all that, there's only one step left. And there's a reason why we are on the chopping block. And it's because we're the biggest obstacle they have to their dream coming true.
Yes,
and it's the right team. It's the right team. And I love being able to have you to talk about these big picture things and knowing that you're a Christian, because many people aren't still, and that's the one step they haven't quite gotten to yet. And I'm so appreciative that we share that faith. And I can only imagine that it's what gives you this sense of, you have the sense of calm, when you talk about these things. And people have said the same thing about me. And I can only imagine these are not easy topics to talk about. It must be in some way your faith that helps you face another day and talk about these things without having fear in your heart.
There is, I just have to say, there is great hope that a Christian has in eternity. And that hope is very comforting. The Bible says in the New Testament that perfect love casts out fear.
Amen.
If you're fearful and you do not have God's love for you, if you do not perceive and feel that love for you, your fear will not dissipate. It will magnify, and it will turn into anger. It will turn into angst. It will turn into just destroying your life, basically.
Absolutely.
Pressing you down. But perfect love casts out fear. And there's only one source, according to the Bible, of perfect love in the universe, and that is God's love for us, who gave himself that we might be saved. And you say, well, saved from what? How about all of this? Yeah, we're saved. Christians are saved not only from eternal damnation, but we're also saved from this present evil world. Even though we're in it, we're not part of it.
Absolutely.
And I love to talk about it. That's my profession. That's what I do. You know, there was a young lady back in 1942 who gave her life as I believe, as a martyr. She was with a number of university students in Munich, and she started a little organization which was called the White Rose. And she published, they published pamphlets, and they spread them around to people. They picked addresses out of the phone book, and they mailed these things out, these little pamphlets, leaflets. And, you know, they were all into free speech. They were all into appealing to the consciousness, to the conscience of German citizens who were putting up with this nonsense that was going on in Nazi Germany. And they were standing up, these young students, impressionable, beautiful young people, standing up saying, this is not right. And by the way, this Sophie Scholl was a Christian too, but she stood up for righteousness, and she stood up for free speech and people, to appeal to their conscience. Hey guys, you got to wake up and protest and resist this stuff. She was completely passive. She never picked up a gun. But nevertheless, she was picked up by the Gestapo, and she went through a mock trial, and they executed her by guillotine.
Wow.
Here's her last words. Her last words to the world before they put her on the slab to, execute her. She said, this is a direct quote, "How can we expect righteousness to prevail when there's hardly anyone willing to give themselves up individually to a righteous cause?" That is so profound.
It is.
I read that, brought tears to my eyes.
So many
really.
people, they want to believe the lies of the enemy that says you'll live forever and you'll be superhuman, when he's a liar. He's a liar. He's doing what it takes to get his way. And this world is really not our home, ultimately. And
it really isn't. And in the meantime, we live here with the people of this world.
Amen. Yeah.
Our hearts should break for them, if for nobody else, that they're the ones that are on the short end of the stick right now, and they don't even know it. And the first sentence in the first leaflet that they ever wrote back in 1942, it started out like this. It said, "Nothing is more shameful to a civilized nation than to allow itself to be governed by an irresponsible clique of sovereigns who have given themselves over to dark urges, and that without resisting." This is a call to arms. This is an absolute call to arms for everybody in America, and especially people listening to this. You're trapped. At this point, if you're listening to this video, you are trapped at this point, because we have presented the whole case to you, and now we've given you the answer.
Amen.
As well. And you have to deal with that. Are you going to stand up, or are you going to be a coward and walk away like they did in Nazi Germany? Except for the likes of people like Sophie Scholl. I could look at you and call you Sophie. I probably want to, but I hope you don't lose your head over it. But you know what? Except for good men to stand up, and women to stand up to this and resist it, our fate is certain. Of the world, to this country, our fate is certain. And it's not fait accompli. They thought they were gone after Nazi Germany. They thought the world was coming to an end, that, the Antichrist was going to appear, and he was probably Hitler. And they were sure that the, Bible prophecy was right then for them. But you know what? God said, no, not now. He gave a reprieve to the world for a period of time, 80 years. He could do that again. Don't get me wrong. We can't put God in a box and say, no, he couldn't do it now. Yes, he could. We don't know that he won't. So we occupy until he comes. We do what we do. We must do what we do as a matter of conscience and conviction. But if he chooses to turn things back, we will rejoice. If he doesn't, we won't be surprised.
Right.
We will merely be ready to meet what comes, knowing that it was told about long ago.
Absolutely. And in fact, I was really shocked one time when I found in Acts there where the apostles rejoiced that they had been persecuted for his name. I was like, my mind blew. I'm like, what? You're rejoicing for that? But yeah, we can rejoice in that too, because we have a whole different ending to this. Jesus said, do not love your lives so much. Those who love their lives will lose them. Hello. I mean, But yet we fight for righteousness till the very end. And I thank you so much for your lifelong fight for righteousness and exposing the deeds of darkness, Patrick. You have been a mighty warrior for the good. And thank you for joining me today. Today, I'm going to put the links to Patrick's YouTube, his newsletter, which I've been on for a long time. It's amazing, the Technocracy newsletter, as well as his books and his free speech platform, Family in Christ. Let's just take a moment after this video and offer prayers for Patrick, his family, and for his work, that God may will it to last as long as he wishes. And thanks again, Patrick. May God bless you. It was so great talking to you today.
My pleasure. Anytime. Glad to be here. But I don't force anybody. You can't force anybody to come to the trough to drink.
No,
but
what's happening now is.
That's right. What a lot of people, when the light bulbs start going on, that they have been lied to, and that now they're starting to see the truth of the matter. I probably personally believe that only God can take those blinders off of somebody.
No doubt.
But when they start to come off, then they're open to receive truth from Him.
Yes.
As well as just the truth of the matter.
Yes.
You know, God is able to enter into a circumstance of a person that is looking for truth, because they're saying, I want to know the truth.
Yeah.
Here comes God. Here He comes.
But that's it. That's it. And you know what? That's exactly what happened to me, because I was in the New Age movement, and I knew. I was so arrogant. I knew exactly how the world works. We create our realities. Are you kidding me? I'm a creator. You're a creator. You just don't know it, you know? And when I learned that the New Age movement had ties to the Lucis Trust and Luciferianism, holy moly, my face hit the ground. I was on my knees saying, and you know, it's that humility, right?
Yes.
That's this gateway to God saying, okay, my child, here's you. Now you're in the position to hear. And now I'm going to show you. And
I know.
That's the beautiful thing, is like, God, He can talk to us whenever He wants, but we have to get to that position of humility. And that's what I think COVID's causing in some way. It's causing that, like, wow, this is really big, you know?
Yes, it is. And, you know, I liken that to the firefighter who went to fight a fire, and he's climbing up on his ladder 50 feet into the air, only to realize that he's leaning up against the wrong wall.
Uh-oh.
Right. That's the point.
That's how I felt.
That's the point of inflection, where a truth seeker will go, oh, crud, now what do I do? I'm on the wrong wall.
You get
I've got to
humble.
climb all the way back down, all the way back up the other wall. I think I'm in big trouble here, and I better
now.
get, you know.
God help me.
Yep. That's exactly right. So anyway, we have fun with it, and I thank you for taking the time to interview me.